We're back at Fort Hall Forum. Judge Reuben Lurie is coming out on stage and will entertain questions from our audience. Judge Lurie.
Do you know any anti-Vietnam songs?
I've heard dozens, really, maybe 50 or more. One of the songs is the famous one Tom Paxton made up. Lyndon Johnson told the nation, have no fear of escalation. We are trying everyone to please. Though it isn't really war, we're sending 50,000 more to help save Vietnam from Vietnamese. It's one of Tom's best songs. He gets tremendous applause when he sings it, but I don't believe it has been played on the radio much. Let me sing you one which I made up myself. Doesn't mention Vietnam by name, and it's conceivable that in another period of history I might sing it with quite different connotations. But I know what it means to me right now. I know that the song gets good applause when I sing it in my concerts, whether at Carnegie Hall or out in Central Park or anywhere, and I wanted to sing it on the Smothers Brothers show a couple months ago. And the Smothers Brothers wanted me to sing it too. They said, oh, that's great. But the CBS brass said flatly, we will cut this song out of the show, and they did. They made this about a year and a half ago. Not quite. Back in 1942, I was a member of a good platoon. We were on maneuvers in Louisiana one night by the light of the moon. The captain told us to ford a river, that's how it all begun. We were knee-deep in the big muddy, the big fool said to push on. Well, the sergeant said, sir, are you sure this is the best way back to the base? Sergeant, go on, I've forded this river about a mile above this place. It'll be a little soggy, but just keep slogging, we'll soon be on dry ground. We were waist deep in the big muddy, the big fool said to push on. Well, the sergeant said, sir, with all this equipment, no man will be able to swim. Sergeant, don't be nervous, Nellie, the captain said to him. All we need is a little determination, men follow me, I'll lead on. We were neck deep in the big muddy, the big fool said to push on. Well, all at once the moon clouded over, we heard a gurgling cry. A few seconds later, the captain's helmet was all that floated by. The sergeant said, turn around, men, I'm in charge from now on. And we just made it out of the big muddy with the captain dead and gone. We stripped and dived and found his body stuck in the old quicksand. I guess he didn't know that the water was deeper than the place he'd once before been. Another stream had joined the big muddy about a half mile from where we'd gone. We were lucky to escape from the big muddy when the big fool said to push on. Well, I'm not going to point any moral, I'll leave that for yourself. Maybe you're still walking, you're still talking, you'd like to keep your health. But every time I read the paper, them old feelings come on. We're waist deep in the big muddy, the big fool says to push on. Waist deep, neck deep, soon even a tall man will be over his head. We're waist deep in the big muddy, the big fool says to push on.
here. Come on. Is it correct that CBS only wanted you to delete the last verse of this song you just sang?
I never spoke directly to CBS. I spoke to... No. For the record, we had a rehearsal on Monday, and on Tuesday we had another rehearsal, and I sang this, and the CBS censor who sits in on the rehearsals said, I was told that he said to Thomas Mothers that I don't think that song's going to be possible to sing. People might think it refers to Johnson. Thomas Mothers says, "Oh, don't be ridiculous." But on Wednesday, I was asked by one of the, whether it was Thomas Mothers or one of the other people connected with the show, said, "Could you take out that sixth verse there?" And I said, "No, that's part of the song." And so exactly what the CBS censor said, I don't know, or what New York said, I don't know. But I was asked at one time, I think it was Wednesday of that week, if that verse could be taken out. And I said no. Finally, on Friday, when the show was taped, we were getting down to the line, and the bargaining was going back and forth, and the phone call went to New York, and the producer said, "Well, Pete, they say they want to cut the song, and we say it's our show, and we're going to put it in." And so we went ahead and put it in on the taping. But as evidently during the next 4 or 5 days, the New York said, "Well, it may be your show, but it's our network," and it came out. I think they're wrong, though. I think the network really belongs to the American people.
Gentlemen, way back. Come on.
Would you make a comment on the role of the art in changing society?
Art, and by art, I agree with you. Dancing, theater, poetry, novels, songs, funny papers. All the arts have been used not only to change society, but to preserve society. From the days when human beings lived in tribes, through the days of feudalism and slavery, and capitalism, communism, whatever social system people live in, the arts have never been, quote, just entertainment. Shakespeare was a great entertainer, but he was not just a great entertainer. His plays, play after play, bring out his fundamental ideological position that the happiness of the people depend upon an honest monarch. And today, I think anybody who thinks that the arts should be just entertainment is demeaning the purpose of art in life. Now, this doesn't mean that art is all political. Someone once said, art is a weapon in political progress. Well, it's true, maybe it is, but a bread knife is a weapon. It also cuts bread. And I'd say that art helps us to live by giving us a larger picture of our life. And yet, if it's really good art, it comes back to us and helps us live better. So that the Negro sharecropper who goes to his Baptist church and sings, "Oh Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn," is lifted out of his own troubles, to think of things that went on 4,000 years ago. But this very song strengthens him in his own situation in the here and now. And my own opinion is that art at its best has this dual role of lifting us out of our troubles and also helping us solve them.
Are there many anti-communist songs sung by the people living in these oppressed lands?
I haven't learned any. I haven't actually heard them, but I know that they exist in some of the European countries. There were people who found they did not get along with the new government for one reason or another, and there were songs like people in prison have often made up in every country of the world. There are not generally as many as you'd think, because in many of these countries, for example, we all know of the Hungarian rebellion of 1956, the people in Hungary, some of them might have hated the communist regime. Some of the Hungarians, for the first time, had a relatively happy life. Remember that Hungary had a fascist regime all during the 1920s and 1930s, a highly anti-Semitic regime. So that I can't tell you any more than that. I've spoken to A.L. Lloyd, who's collected folk songs in Romania and Bulgaria, and he said, when somebody asked him that exact question, he said, well, they do exist, but frankly not too many. Probably in England and America you can find songs written by bankers, but there are not very many of them.
What is it? Put your question first.
Could you please be more specific as to what solutions and what actions you think should be taken to combat the present political problems in the United States?
What actions should be taken to combat the present political problems in the United States?
I will now give you all the answers to all the world's problems. Maybe I should start off with that wonderful opening line of Malcolm X, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies. I just can't believe everybody here is my friend, and I don't want to leave anybody out. It's a wonderful opening line. The only thing I'd say is that don't bury your head in the sand. Don't get discouraged. When I was 16 years old, I loved the outdoors, as I still do, but I felt the world was so messed up, the most honest thing to do was be a hermit. And some good people jumped on me like a ton of bricks. They said, what kind of morality do you call that? You're going to be pure yourself and let the rest of the world go to hell? So I cannot answer your question specifically, of course, but I say, whatever you decide to do, don't sit back and say nothing can be done. The people who will tell you the world is going to be finished in a few generations, the human race is going to be all over, throw their cocksureness right back in their face. What makes them think that they are so right? How can they be so certain? They think they know all the answers for certain, 100% sure that there's going to be no human race 100 years from now? I admit it's perfectly possible. But if anybody asks me, what would you do? I say, don't just sit back and say it's a foregone conclusion. Figure that the world is at least a 50-50 chance, and maybe your little grain of sand, as much as mine, might help tip the scale, and it might be the grain of sand which would mean the human race will keep on going.
I missed your first words. All quiet,
What
please.
degree do you consider socially conscious rock music to be in the tradition of American protest?
To what degree do you consider socially conscious rock music to be in the tradition of folk music and the fight for social justice?
Here again, I can't say that I've heard that much of it. I've heard a little of it, and my guess is that it's in the tradition of a lot of popular poetry from Francois Villon right on down, it undoubtedly comments. Whether these comments are all understood, though, is a different thing. And I myself am kind of an old-fashioned person when it comes to art of any kind. I believe that art does need to be understood. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to make everything simplistic. Go Tell Aunt Rhody the Old Gray Goose is Dead is a very simple song, but it's got layers and layers of meaning. And art at its best should always have many layers of meaning. We know that some commercial art often has only a surface meaning, and it's so shallow that after you've, well, take a pop song. Wrap your troubles in dreams and dream your troubles away. It's not got enough layers of meaning to keep you, so that this is why you can leaf through the years of popular art, whether it's the comic strips or popular music or popular novels, and laugh at them because their meanings are so shallow. At the same time, if you deny your audience any superficial meaning, you're making it very difficult for people to get with you. And this, I think, is the fault of a number of avant-garde artists, whether they're painters or writers or musicians. Some of the music schools can produce music which is so complicated to listen to that the average person just turns it down. And sometimes I think this can happen with the music you just mentioned, what they call rock music. That is, there are a lot of people who might be more interested in it if they could figure out what the heck the words are.
Come on. Has the establishment ever seen fit to invite you to entertain the troops in Vietnam?
I'm not sure if I know what you mean by the establishment, but I never have been invited, no.
I'm disturbed by your statement that the Israelis were trying to take over. Can you give us some facts on what this?
This lady says she is disturbed by your statement relative to the Israelis and the Egyptian and the Arab population in Israel, and she would like to have you support that statement.
If I can remember what my exact words were, I'll try and reconstruct it. I said, if the Israelis would admit the injustice that was committed when they decided that they would become they would start a new nation where 1 million people already lived. Vermont is approximately the size of Israel minus the Negev desert. Vermont has 400,000 people in it. There were 1 million farmers and small townsmen in Palestine at the time the Zionists decided that this would be where they must establish a national home. Now, in many ways, I tend to agree with them that after 2,000 years of never being allowed to be a first-class citizen anywhere, not in Spain, not in France, not in Germany, not in Russia, not in Poland, not in England, not in America, the Jews had a right to want to find one little spot in this earth where they could be first-class citizens. And surely their ancient homeland, which they remembered for 2,000 years and refused to forget for 2,000 years. That's a long, long time. Sure, that would be the logical place. At the same time, not to realize that there were 1 million people there, I think was very foolish. Why didn't they insist that every new settler learn the Arab language? Why didn't they? Martin Buber said they should, but they didn't listen to him.
I don't want to defend Johnson, but I think the Directamente is a little more complex than the song suggested. I just wanted to know that how calling somebody a fool is going to, help solve the problem.
This gentleman suggests that he believes that the Vietnam situation is a little more complicated than what would appear in the song that you sang.
First of all,
he also says, and this is the barb, that he doesn't quite see how referring to anybody as a fool helps solve the problem.
I am a fool. I'm a criminal fool. Maybe the whole human race is. That song did not mention Vietnam once. I'm a shoemaker. I go around the world making shoes, and if they fit, why, it's not me. Now, I'll agree. Vietnam situation is very complicated, and I think probably that one of the greatest dangers in the world is what this thing we call oversimplification. When I was at Harvard 30 years ago, I listened in on one of the lectures of Alfred North Whitehead, a wonderful little old man. He said he would inscribe above the entrance to every university, strive for simplicity, but learn to mistrust it. So I agree with that.
Come on. Come on, this gentleman who stood. Come on. Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute, please. All quiet, please.
Do you advocate the violence of the March on Washington as a method of war in Vietnam?
Do you advocate violence and the March on Washington as a means of protest against Vietnam?
I've never advocated violence ever myself, although I was in an organization once that advocated violence for 3.5 years, and I think under similar circumstances I would have joined this organization again because it was an extreme situation. I don't think I'd ever join it again, but between the year of 1942, 1945, I was in the U.S. Army fighting Hitler. And so I'm not a complete pacifist. That's the only way I can answer your question, sir.
Further question? Yes?
What do you think is the effectiveness of the recent renaissance in the resistance movement to the war, in marches and turning in of back?
What do you think is the effectiveness of the recent renaissance of resistance to the war by way of the marches, the protests, and the rest of it?
Sir, really, you're asking me a lot of these questions, asking me as though I was some authority. I'm just as ignorant as most people. I feel like Will Rogers, who used to say, all I know is what I read in the papers. I'd say that every little bit helps, and while I don't agree 100% with a lot of people, I'd say go to it. Maybe you're right, maybe I'm not. My own particular angle is I'm trying to reach the 180 million people who don't read the newspapers much, who all get all their information from that little magic box in the corner of their room we call a TV set. And this TV medium is tightly under control. Do we realize how much it's under control? This is a wonderful Ford Hall Forum, but has it been put on TV? Why isn't it? Because TV is the greatest mass media the world has ever known. Freedom of speech is wonderful if you're speaking to a few hundred, or if you're speaking to 1,000, or even tens of thousands. But if you get on the Smothers Brothers program with 35 million people listening, they're very careful about what is said.
Further question? Yes? Come on.
What good do Vietnam protests if we don't begin to admit to crimes like the ones that are part of our heritage against the Indians? What good projecting on Vietnam and protesting the evil there if we don't begin in our own communities and our own homes to begin to look at the crimes that are part of our own heritage?
What good is it?
Beginning this.
What good is it to protest against the situation in Vietnam when we do not look in our own history to see the crimes that have been committed here, as, for example, against the Indians?
I tend to agree with you, sir, that freedom and peace begin in your own home and your own community. There's many a man who's been a great revolutionist, but his poor wife has been enslaved to the stove all her life.